Welcome to part 2 of the New Year's Eve celebration. We are now in Roanoke, Virginia on May 27, 2017 to ride and see Norfolk and Western 611. In the morning, we first ride on the Powhatan Arrow excursion train from Roanoke, Virginia to Lynchburg and back. I gotta say, when we first got the tickets to even ride the train, we got really excited. And as the days drew closer to the deadline, we got more and more excited. Then, when the day came to step on board the train and ride it, we had a blast riding this thing. Trust me, if you get a chance to ride behind 611, you should really take it because it is really awesome to do. After riding behind 611 in the morning, we then chased the Pocahontas excursion from Roanoke to Walton/Redford, Virginia and back. We are now located at the Route 719 Switchback Road Railroad crossing, where a former Norfolk and Western coaling tower is located. After waiting about a couple of minutes, actually it was more of like about an hour because when we got there, the train already passed and was already at the Y. The 611 came running around the corner and passed our camera. our chase of Norfolk and Western 611 was over, the next day we were on the road again, bound for Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. But on the way there, we made some stops along the way. One such stop was at Harpers Ferry, West Virginia. The second we drove into town, it felt like we were back at the Greenfield Village. But unlike the Greenfield Village, where all the buildings and whatnot were imported, all the buildings here were original, and even the roads were brick instead of the usual asphalt or whatever else they use. We then drove to the Baltimore, Ohio station in town, and while we were there, we caught Amtrak's Capital Limited as it pulled into the station. It was being led by Amtrak 86 and 821. Also, this was my first time seeing Amtrak Superliner cars on an Amtrak train, which I thought was really cool. We then stayed in Harpers Ferry, West Virginia for a little while longer before we got back on the road again. Our next stop was Baltimore, Maryland at the B&O Railroad Museum. We didn't get to go into the building, but we did get to see an important steam locomotive that is near and dear to us. Today, the locomotive is lettered as American Freedom Train Number 1, but we know it more as Chessie Special 2101. Back in the 1970s, 2101 was best known for pulling the Chessie Steam Special across most of the Chessie system. But thanks to a roundhouse fire, 2101 was sidelined. After Roswell traded 2101 for C&O 614, 2101 was put back into its American Freedom Train colors, re-lettered number 1, and was put on display in front of the Railway Museum here. And ever since then, it has stood here, just sitting in the rain, I guess. Well, I mean, it hasn't been raining all the time, but you get what I mean. We hope someday that 2101 will one day ride the rails again, but for now, we are absolutely glad we have seen the engine for the first time in real life. After seeing 2101, we finally arrived in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. The reason why we came to Philly was because of America's flagship, the SS United States. The SS United States is one of a few ocean liners left in existence. And I gotta say, it is one very beautiful ship. If you want a full history on this ship, you can go to Jacob Western 11's channel and see episode 1 of Ocean Liners, The History, where he goes and talks about the history, well, of this famous ship, the SS United States.
I thought it was a funny idea.
What is it?
After seeing the SS United States, we then visited the famous Northeast Corridor. We went to the SEPTA Folcroft Station, located on Baltimore Avenue, and while we were there, we saw an Amtrak train literally roar by the station. It was being led by Amtrak veterans 646. After the Amtrak train came roaring on by, we then caught a SEPTA train pulling into the station. The train was consisted of SEPTA 840 and 839. After our trips in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Virginia was over, we then found ourselves in Cincinnati, Ohio on June 21st, 2017. On this day, we went on a river cruise on the Belle of Cincinnati. Fun fact, due to the fact that the crew stole a trophy from the Belle of Louisville, which is located in Louisville, Kentucky, they are now considered a pirate ship, and the crew has to fly the Jolly Roger flag every time they go sailing on the Ohio River. After riding the river cruise, we then arrived at John's Train Adventures Season 2 Episode 14. Wow, it's been a little while since we've batted into an episode, huh? Shows how much I've been uploading. Anyway, we are now at Valley Crossing, where we see NS 1107, 9287, and 2546 as they cross the crossing. A little later in the episode, we then caught BNSF 4708 leading its short intermodal train. BNSF 4708 is a former Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe warbonnet painted locomotive, but instead of being lettered for Santa Fe, it's lettered for BNSF. After that, we then went to Painesville, Ohio for the Tall Ships Festival. This event happened on July 7th, 2017. We had a lot of fun at the Tall Ships Festival. We even took a ride on one of those ships out into Lake Erie. After that, we then visited the former New York Central Painesville Depot. It's now home to the Painesville Railroad Museum. The depot is a great place to see CSX trains roar by the train station.
Holy cow.
Seriously, it's like being on the Northeast Corridor, but with less tracks and no overhead wires or anything like that. Or any electric trains and hardly any passenger trains, but mostly freight. And in our case, we see CSX 3400 and 3119 as they roar by the station. Hey guys, I made a bit of an editing error here. The next series of shots you're about to see happened before the Tall Ships Festival and the second coming of the warbonnet. Sorry about that. Well anyway, our next shots take us to the Kentucky Railway Museum on June 27th, 2017. On this day, we will be riding the Kentucky Railway Museum's New Haven to Boston excursion train. Leading the train to Boston will be LNN 411, and in returning the train back to New Haven will be Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe 2546. After riding the excursion train, I then caught Santa Fe 2546 as they parked the locomotive in the yard to finish the day. Well, while we were there, we also saw Chesapeake and Ohio 2716. During 1981, C&O 2716 was restored by the Southern Railroad to operate excursions on their railway. Unfortunately, by 1982, 2716 was sidelined due to a cracked firebox and put in storage at Southern's Birmingham shops. Later, when the railroad became Norfolk Southern and the steam program came to an end, 2716 was then moved to the Fort Wayne Railroad Historical Society, where they restored it again and ran it in 1996. But unfortunately, it didn't last long, and by 2001, 2716 was returned to the Kentucky Railway Museum, never to run again. Well, until now. Today, there's a group called the Kentucky Steam Heritage Corporation that is getting 2716 back up and running again. If you want to see their website, I'll have it linked in the description box down below. After visiting the Kentucky Railway Museum, we then made our way to Lagrange, Kentucky. Located on East Main Street is the Lagrange Railway Museum. At the museum, on the display track, is the Flying Duchess, an 060 tank engine built by the Robert Stephenson and Howarth Company in 1952 in the United Kingdom. Although finding a British steam locomotive so far away from home is very interesting in its own right, most rail fans know Lagrange for a very different reason: the street running. Unfortunately, the day we came, no trains came. Fortunately, about 2 weeks later, on July 15, 2017, we were back in Lagrange, and we finally caught a train running down the street. It was being led by CSX 4023, 4699, and 297. in that day, we were in Louisville, Kentucky to see the ship that got its trophy stolen by the other ship we rode on earlier, the Belle of Louisville. Unlike the Belle of Cincinnati, which used propellers to propel it down the river, the Belle of Louisville actually uses its stern wheel to go downriver. And the best part is, the Belle of Louisville is actually steam powered. Well, and that brings us to the end of part 2. Join us next time in part 3 as we continue our journey back into 2017. Well, I hope you guys liked this video. See you in part 3.